Back. We're gonna try this one more time. Uh, we had some technical difficulties, so let's see if we can try to make it work this time.
Bear with us. Bear with us.
Yeah. All right, Phil. So we'll kind of no, we'll kind of skip over the that whole part, and we'll just kind of get into the whole natural history of like what their habitat looks like for these Saltuarius geckos.
Okay, as far as like natural history, how about if we start like at the beginning with these guys and all that?
Perfect.
So, okay, so
Just
with
teach us.
Saltuarius and all that, there, there's a lot of interesting things about these guys and all that. For one, the name itself, it means keeper of the forest, and
Okay.
that's all it is.
Awesome.
There's nothing else to it. But when you actually examine the animals and all that, look really deep into them, then you really get it. Hey, these are true, deep forest animals and that. But there's 7 species that are recognized right now, and it's and are actually relatively new to science and all that. When you actually look at the years that they were discovered, the first one was actually Saltuarius cornutus, and that was like back in the late 1800s and all that. But then we almost skipped almost close to 100 years and all that. Then it was you had like Salabrosus, then you had Swaini, then you had Wyberba and the Wyberba complex, or there was a couple of geckos that were split up to make the Wyberba complex, such as Kite and Maritzi. And then the last one, or you could say the one that was the newest one is Exemius, which is discovered like in 2013. And it's only had one little tiny population and all that. At one point, there was 8 species. There was Saltuarius occultus, but that got put into its own genus, which is Aurea. And, like the rest of the Australian leaftails and all that, they're all in the genus Phalaris. So there's like about 10 of them. There's just one that was just recently described last year. I think that was like back in September, October, or something like that. So they're the things that morphologically that differentiate Saltuarius from Phalaris is that of course the size, and there's tail shapes, their scalation as well too, but primarily it's the rostral or their nose and all that. With Saltuarius and all that. The scales they come in contact with the like with the nostrils and all that, while Phalaris they don't. So there's there's for a taxonomist and all that, that's what they're looking for, but for us and all that, we're looking at size. We're looking at the giants of Australia, because these are not small diminutive geckos and all that. They're quite large, but they're absolutely impressive. Their bodies, they're somewhat kind of depressed. Their scales, they're very spiny. They're small, but when you really take a close look at them and all that, they almost have like this little rosette around them with this granular scales popping out. So when you really look at the animals and all that, you're looking at more surface area. With all these spines coming around them, or coming off their body, off their tails, on their limbs, their head, and everything. And you have to wonder, what's the point of having all this armament, on them? And when you compare that to the type of habitat that they live in, they're animals that need a lot of oxygen, animals that need high humidity, and of course it contributes to the animals being extremely cryptic as well too, because boy, they can really blend in to their surroundings. Even in I've never seen these animals in the wild. I've never been to Australia, but there's been plenty of individuals that have, and those individuals, they've told me that you can look right at them and you won't even know that they're there. And even in captivity, very, very reminiscent to the genus Europlatus, that you can look right in the cage. You can be staring at them right in front of your face, and you'll never see them. they blend in so perfectly. But something that's kind of cool that is very different from other geckos and all that is that they have blue mouths and they got a blue tongue.
Really? I've
So
never seen the inside. All species?
yeah,
Really?
they've got blue mouths and all that. So they can vocalize here and there, but generally they're pretty quiet. So the thing that is very interesting is about their limbs as well too. They're very lanky, very long, and their scales, their digits are padless. Um, so they have, and they don't have like a precaudal pad like on the tail tip or anything like that. So they rely heavily on their the shape of their body and also their claws. And their claws are, I mean, geez, if you pick one up, you're going to get scratched up. It's like
Really?
a monitor lizard or something. So, it's just one of those things that if you're not used to it, you're going to get a little bit of scratches here and there. Um, yeah, they're very they're all nocturnal, but they will bask once in a while. They're uh, very quiet animals as well too. They're creatures of habit. They just blend in with their surroundings, and they really don't like being disturbed that much, and they don't like their environment disturbed as well too. So a couple years ago, I think that was back in 21, Australia had all those fires down there, and it just went from one coast to the other, and a lot of the habitat got destroyed. But which was terrible. But they're going through an extreme drought. But animals are resilient, so they've bounced back, and different habitat as well too. So they haven't gone extinct or anything like that. I'm sure that populations have gone down a little bit, but they'll as the old saying goes, life finds a way.
Yes. Yes, I agree.
Definitely.
I definitely agree. What can you explain to us and our viewers
Mhm.
from what you know? What kind of habitat are they coming from? What are the claws for? What's the tail for? What type of environment have they adapted to?
Well, they all the genus Saltuarius, they're confined to the east coast of Australia, like Queensland, New South Wales, and they're basically, depending on the species, that they either come from, deep, heavy rainforest areas, or which some
Rainforest.
areas are a little bit more temperate, a little bit more open, and there's these granite outcrops. And even within these forests and all that, you have these individual shelves or different rock piles and all that that the animals are kind of concentrated on. It's not that they won't they'll utilize that as like a home base, but they'll jump from tree to tree. They'll have their own little territory, and some of them are gregarious. You'll find different like ages within, let's say one different type of rock face, while others are a little bit more solitude. So you have that. You have sclerophyll forests as well too, especially when you get down to that Gold Coast area, like where Queensland and New South Wales and all that. There's almost like a little congregated area where your Wyberba complex is actually located down there, and also Swaini as well too. And just for the record, I guarantee you that there are other species that are out there that just have not been discovered because, I mean,
Wouldn't doubt
Australia,
it.
yeah, it's a wild area, and I mean, it's very dense, and nobody walks into these areas. So, once in a while, you'll have, a group of individual scientists and that naturalists that are going, looking for new species and all that, and they'll stumble upon one, and that's basically how they did with Exemus. Nobody knew that it was there, but all of a sudden, boom, there's a brand new Saltaria
That's
species.
the one in 2013,
Yeah,
2013.
correct,
That's
correct.
insane. I
Yeah.
but I don't doubt it. I mean, as much as it surprises me, it doesn't, because
Mhm.
I walk around, I spend a lot of times in the woods near where I live, and I feel that I cross places that people just don't go, and it's right there, you just it's hard to explain, but I just feel like people don't if you're not looking for something in particular, you're not going to find it, right? And who's going to wind up in the middle of a jungle in Australia? It's just you need to be very specific, very direct with the mission, I guess, and I don't think there's enough people too, which is almost beautiful in itself. Leave them alone. Once I hate to say it, but once mankind finds something, we kind of have a habit of destroying it. So it's I guess it's a double-edged sword. But a new species is definitely a silver lining. It's doesn't surprise me one bit. Awesome. Are they in the hobby? I'd imagine 2013. We can't really have them over here.
No, it as far as like Saltuarius being in captivity, we'll just say that the majority of them were came out of Europe, and there's been several Europeans that have kept them since I would say like the late 1990s, early 2000s, but only varied, like only one or two species.
No.
And probably wasn't until about I think around probably 2016, somewhere around there, that some of the other species started popping up. The two that you normally saw, actually three, I take that back, was Saltuarius, cornutus, and Wyberba. And it wasn't too long after Wyberba was actually described. There was a group of them that actually came into the United States, and some, if there's even some listeners right now, it was back in at the Breeders' Expo down in Florida when it was going. There was probably about I'd say maybe 7, 8, 9, 10 different pairs that were available. They popped up and all that. So they they've been relatively new to the hobby. But the other species and all that, it wasn't until maybe about 2016, maybe 15, that they started popping up. So, for myself, out of the 7 species, I've had the privilege of keeping and breeding 6 of them. So the only one is Exemius and all that. And to my knowledge, none of them have, besides the original description, that area nobody's been back to, and there's been none like in captivity, even in Australia too. So there has the people that usually get into Saltuarius, they're in it for the long haul, and they try and get acquire of course healthy, good animals, and as many bloodlines as you can get your hands on that are absolutely legit, and you just try and keep those animals going, and that's kind of what I've done too.
Nice.
You've done some, I don't keep them, but a bunch of my buddies do. A bunch of my buddies have gotten some from you. Amazing, amazing. Nothing short of amazing. I mean, your name is just on that elite level. If you get something from Phil, it's I don't know. I know you're super modest, but it's like an achievement for people. People look for your animals and brag about having your animals. I mean, and that's not for anything. I mean, it's clear to a lot of us out here that are trying to raise the bar, that you've set it super high. Jason, I think you're getting some of his animals now.
No, I'm not getting some of his animals. Like I said, I'm just getting I am getting Saltuarius, and I am getting some Phylors.
Well, I thought they were from Phil's, somebody from Phil's lines or something.
I mean, they might be.
Good buddy of
You
mine
never
has
know.
them.
Yeah. So speaking of so let's kind of get into this stuff with with their diet, what kind of stuff, because we were talking in the background, you were saying some different things. Can you kind of explain to us how often are you feeding them, what kind of prey items are you giving them, and like what's your thought process with that stuff?
Well, the Saltuarius don't have like a high metabolism, and even like with juveniles, they don't. So depending on the size of the animal, that's obviously going to dictate, um, the size of the meal that you're going to give them. But primarily for, let's say insect matter, because they're not frugivorous, they're not omnivores, they're not going to take any type of plant material, nothing like that. They're, these guys are predators, and I wouldn't, even though I haven't tried it, but they probably will take baby lizards if that's something available. I would think that baby crested geckos and morning geckos would be an absolute treat to them left and right. So if anybody's got some available, I'm willing to send some up. I'll try it. But primarily, like dubias, waxworms once in a while, and crickets that have a high quality diet. I can't overemphasize that no matter what your insects that you're working with, you have to just stay up and up on the diet that you're giving them. So, but generally, like with adults and all that, during the normal season and all that, because they do need a cool period or shutdown period. You're obviously not going to feed them during that time. Um, they only need to be fed like twice a week, and you don't have to dump, let's say, a whole pile of insects into their cage. If anything, it should be the opposite, because these animals, they can become stressed out pretty quick, and especially if they're juveniles, they're the only defense that they have is their tail. If they feel threatened, especially even by an insect that's just walking around in their cage, they'll throw their tail, and they will grow it back. Don't get me wrong, but it won't look like the original. But they 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 just don't like a lot of stress in their environment. So when it comes to actually feeding, at least with the adults, at least twice a week, and with the juveniles, you could feed them about 3 times a week. And as far as like the quantity of insects and all that, let's just say you're feeding juveniles crickets. You only have to put like 1 or 2 of them in their cage. And what I like to do is pinch the back legs off, so they kind of have that little undulating motion. It's just easier for them to pick off. And for the adults and all that, they're strong predators. They're ravenous. When they a lot of mine, they recognize the hand that feeds them, and so they'll come out of their hides or hiding places and all that, and they're looking right at me like hey, what's the tree? What kind of dinner am I getting tonight? But let's hypothetically say I've got a pair set up. Let's just say it's a Salabrosis. I'll throw probably about 8 adult crickets in that cage, and they're gone like within probably like minutes. They'll actively put those insects down.
So
but if you're like Jason and I were talking before, if you're using dubias, I would only put just a couple of them in a little ceramic bowl. So that way you don't have dubias walking around in the cage, that don't get eaten, because they could easily stress the animals out. But, again, you have to pay attention to the size of that insect as well, too, because Saltuarius, with their heads, they have this big triangular shaped head, but then it bottlenecks down to this, sort of thin tubular shape neck. So that neck and all that, it's not going to expand like a python or monitor or nothing like that.
That's a good point.
Yeah, so you have to pay attention to that. Those insects, even though they could probably take an inch or inch and a half, or maybe inch and 3/4 inch, quarter inch, roach and all that. The animal could take it, probably kill it, but is it actually going to swallow it down?
All right. So we did get a question in the chat from Centaur. He said, in all seriousness, if you were to feed morning geckos to them, how would you go about that?
Throw them in the cage.
Pre-kill it? Okay,
nope,
just throw it in there. All right.
Yep, I guarantee you by the morning, that morning gecko's gone.
Listen, I feed them to my gargoyles.
Yeah,
it's like a very clear. It's clearly a natural thing when you watch it. Like it's like watching a crocodile. They flip it around in their mouth and get it to the right shape and swallow. I mean, it's just so, from the way they catch them and hold them. It's like some animals, I believe. I mean, it's just natural. There's no reason to beat around the bush. I mean,
right. They're predators. That's all it is.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah. What are you adamantly doing any extra supplementation with your I know you're obviously doing an amazing gut load with your insects, but what other type of supplementation do you?
Well, and that's a good point and all that, because I feel that you really shouldn't over supplement these animals. they are nocturnal. They will come out and bask once in a while. So, UVB, UVA bulbs and all that they are beneficial, especially if you have live plants in the cage and that. But the animals, uh, they really only need to be supplemented probably like once every maybe 10 days.
Really?
For juveniles, you may want to do it like once a week, but you don't need to over supplement. As far as like the supplements out there, you just want to watch out that there's some products out there that have like a high D3 content. You kind of want to stay away from that. So, I'm not going to name, what products are, to
Yeah.
use and all that.
Well, what do you
But
use?
what now?
Which product do you use?
Well, I actually mix it up and all that. I use
Okay.
various ones. There's Mineral Indoor, there's Repashy products, there's Arcadia products and all that. So there's Necton Rep as well too. You just need to look at the ingredients, how you got your animal set up. But and I'm not saying you need to mix all of those products in together, but just use one maybe 1 month or for a little stretch and then just change it up, because you don't want to be stagnant. And that really applies to general husbandry for any reptile, amphibian, any animal for that part.
Do you find that supplementation is more important through any phase of life with the animals, like babies, hatchlings, and all the way to pre-laying females? Or is it just the same all the way around every 10 days for all
No,
life
like with
phases?
juveniles, they obviously need a little bit more because they are growing, and they're not growing at an extreme fast pace or anything like that. But yeah, compared to adults and all that, they definitely need a little bit more. And during the breeding season, females they need a little bit of extra calcium and supplementation, and that it's not going to hurt them. But I'm just saying that every time you feed the animals, you don't need to supplement them. You just don't want to. You just want to really watch out for that.
Especially if you're feeding them some quality bugs. People
Exactly.
underestimate the power of gut loading, or I don't even want to say gut loading, because gut loading seems to me like to be like a short-term thing. Like, I
It's
guess everybody
just a
doesn't
good
raise
healthy
their
diet.
bugs, but I raise my bugs, and I raise my
Yeah.
bugs for that reason. I want to know what these things are full of. Like, I feel
Mhm.
much more confident knowing that I've raised these things for, say, 6 weeks by the time I start feeding crickets off, that these things have eaten what I've fed them for that long. Now, I get everybody can't do that, so you have to gut load, but it's extremely important. Like your animals are getting their nutrition through what you're giving them. What's in that bug's gut matters more almost than the bug itself. It's
Right. Yeah,
I
yeah,
feel super important.
right. And and as far as like gut loading, there's you have dry food and you've got different vegetables or fruits
Yeah.
and all that too. So I've experimented over the years like with different dry foods, and I've actually found that matsuri is really good.
I've
So
heard this.
yeah, it's like there's so many zoos around the world that uses that. And
Really?
yeah, so it's high, it's well known. You look at their ingredient list and all that, and it's top quality products that
I'll
they're
order that
using.
tonight.
Yeah.
Good. I've never tried it. Never tried it. And I raise I raise a lot of bugs, a lot of
Mhm.
feeders, So that's all I would love to try. That's great. Say thank you. Thank you for telling me that.
So for the species that you're currently keeping, can you kind of tell us like from like a hatchling to
You're gone, Jay. I don't know
all the
if you
way
can hear me.
to as cage? Would you am I back?
Yes.
All right, cool. So can you kind of explain like from a hatchling all the way to an adult breeding pair, what size tanks would you put these geckos in?
So like babies and all that, typically Saltuarius and that the one interesting thing about these guys and all that is that just to establish they're of the family Carphodactyline, and they're an old ancient group of geckos and that, and that would comprise just it's a group of geckos that comprises of your New Caledonia species, your New Zealand species, and also various Australian species too, like Nephirus, Underwoodosaurus, of course, Carphodactylus, Saltuarius, Phylurus, and that. But they're long-lived animals and all that, and they only lay 2-3 clutches, and that's about it. Or if they, of course, New Zealand geckos and your Trachyrhynchus and that Trachycephalus and New Caledonia, they're only going to give birth to 1 or 2 babies in that. So they have a low fecundity in that. So, with that in mind, you're not going to have like a lot of babies on your hands at any one point. But when they do, hatch out, you need to keep those babies separate. You really shouldn't keep them like in a gregarious setup or anything like that with multiple babies. I mean, you probably could, but really, why should you?
Yeah.
So, like with my babies and all that, when they start out, I like using the small or medium-sized critter keepers. They're cheap, they're easy to acquire, and I'll keep for a substrate like about an inch and a half of just straight damp peat moss in it, and then I'll have like one little cork slab leaning up to the back, and those babies they usually shed like within a day or two after they hatch out, so they're not going to eat like right away, and they really don't start eating until like about day number 7 to 10. It takes a little while, but I keep them set up like that, pretty much like at room temperature. And as the animals progress, of course, these are animals that need to be in vertical cages, not in a shoebox, rack system, nothing like that. But they need to be kept like in vertical setup. You can put some live plants in the cages if you want, but I generally don't. As far as like juveniles, it seems like the more material you have in that cage, of course the animal can blend in, but they have a harder time finding their insect prey. So you want the animals to actually utilize their surroundings as much as they can, and especially when it comes to feeding and also watering as well too. But as we'll just take for instance as an example like Salabrosis. Juveniles are right away like in the medium-sized pet carriers, but then probably they'll stay in those cages for about maybe probably 4 to 7 months. And then after that, what I like using is the Exoterra, the 12-12-18s. And it'll be the same setup, except for the background. You know how they have the styrofoam background when they come with it? I'll pop that out. And you can actually get there's all sorts of new various backgrounds that are out there now. And I think it was ZooMed. They had this bark type background. It's just a flat.
Just a cork.
Yeah. Yep. And so what you're doing is that those animals who utilize that, you're creating more space, for them to actually, cling on to, walk around on and stuff. And I'll just take two larger pieces of cork bark, lean them up in the back, and I'll keep them in those cages until they're adults, like a 12-12-18, and I'll let you can grow like a smaller or I'd say almost like a teenage type Salabrosis all the way to an adult, in a cage like that. But then for adults, what I like using, there's actually 2 different types of cages. One is like the 24 or the 18-18-24 ZooMed or Exoterra cages. I'll use that size, or I'll use it's the 18 wide, 36 inch long by 24 inch high Exoterra. Yeah, those are nice because you can
big boys.
Yep. And the thing is, you can make it any way that you want. Put all sorts of different live plants in them, branches and whatnot. Let your imagination run wild. The nice thing about these animals is that at least the smaller species, they're not going to really tear their cages up. but you start getting into like cornutus and salabrosis and swaini too, that because they're larger, they will tear the plants apart. And one of the plants that I have experimented with over the years is the sago palms. And yeah, I mean, you can buy them, here and there for like, I don't know, like $15 or whatever. They're long lived. They'll establish a root system like in the cage, and sometimes the animals will actually utilize the root system to bury their eggs in that. So they're sturdy plants. They live like pretty much forever.
Super old plant too. They're like a cycad or something. They're one of the oldest species of plants on the planet. I use them myself. I use those, and I use, believe it or not, the ponytail palms, the little ponytail palms. You go to Home Depot and get them like pre-bonsai, the sagos and the I love them. They are a great plant, but you can have a podcast alone on those sago palms. They're super cool.
And the cool thing is that when you're designing your vivarium, for these things, because they're so cryptic, dinosaur looking. Now you've got the whole habitat. You're making it with a cycad and all that. You're making it, very prehistoric looking. So it's I think all of us, that are keeping lizards or reptiles, that we all have a passion for paleontology and and what the earth was like, millions of years ago. We just want to have that little chunk like in our room or basement or something like that.
If I see a plant that was like in a fossil, like if they find fossils of like a certain plant, so I'm like infatuated with ferns. I love like anything that they found in like the dinosaur eras, Triassic, Jurassic. Like if they have a fossil of it and there's some version of it still alive, it's in one of these tanks.
Yeah.
So what is their do you notice them doing any kind of foraging, like especially when they're younger and you have them like in those small critter keepers, or even like in I don't know, are you doing any kind of bioactive with them?
Believe it or not, I'm actually highly against bioactive cages. Okay.
Really?
Oh,
and
wow.
that's that might sound really off the wall, but I've had so many bad experiences with those stupid insects eating fresh eggs and all that I've lost some valuable animals.
Really?
And I'll never forget one day. I mean, this was years back. I had Uroplatus giganteus, and female just got done laying eggs. I got up early in the morning. She was laying her eggs still, because they Uroplatus bury their eggs. And I come home, and the eggs, I really couldn't tell if they're viable or not or anything like that, initially. But when I came home, I had that cage set up, bioactive, and they were just, they already had holes in them. Those stupid little isopods just tore right into them. And I've had them do that with Saltuarius eggs as well, too, and other geckos. So no isopods. I hate those things. So they're cleaners. They do their own thing, but I will not keep them at all. So, so
I mean, you're not the first person I've heard say that either. Like,
no.
I mean, I've had, like I said,
I've
had super worms go through my eggs. I know that because I like in my Chihuahua tanks, I have like mealworms and super worms just all aerating the soil in there. One of my Chihuahuas dropped eggs, went right through it real quick. I was like, man, that egg wasn't even in there less than a day, and they got through it. They emptied that, hollowed it out. So
what you're doing basically when those eggs are laid, you're offering those isopods like a 32-ounce steak, and so it why there's a thing called preventative maintenance, and I know that the reasoning behind bioactive cages, and it's and that's fine if it works for some people, but when you're working with some rare species and all that, why take the chance? Why take the chance and all that? But getting back to your question, as far as like the behavior, as far as like feeding, like with Saltuarius, even right out of the gate, they're always pointing head down, or they're resting horizontally. It all depends on how the cage is set up and what kind of furnishings. But as soon as an insect is placed in that cage, they know it right away. They just, they'll come right down off their perch. These guys are active predators. They will, seek out that insect. And once they had their one or two, because you don't want to throw, let's just say a juvenile that's like 2 months of age and all that, you don't want to throw like 3, 4, 5, or 6, little crickets in his cage. It's going to stress it out too much. Two, maybe 3 at the most. That's about it. And if there's one still running around, pull it out, because all it's going to do is that animal's already had its full from its 1 or 2 crickets or even a roach and all that, and it really doesn't need that other cricket or insect running around stressing it out, because that's how you lose tails. If that animal feels threatened, it will actually, and that cricket actually crawls up, a piece of cork bark, crawls on its tail, it'll throw its tail. So the one thing about the tails too that I didn't get a chance to mention was that they do regenerate them, but they don't look anything like the original. They almost look like a flat mushroom that's been just smashed.
I was gonna say they kind of don't they look like velvety a little bit?
Yeah, and they have that velvety feel to them as well too. They lose all the spike.
That texture.
Yeah, but the interesting thing is that they grow their tail back fairly quick, but and the tail is very meaty. It's already meaty as it is, original tail, but even that regenerated tail, it's very heavy and meaty as well too.
Interesting. Have you ever witnessed and these things always interest me and kind of excite me, but have you ever witnessed any behaviors with the tails? Do you do anything with them with like courting or defense, or what type of behaviors have you witnessed Saltuarius for say, or any Australian species with their tails?
Yeah, in general, what I've seen like with Phylloris and Saltuarius is that um, uh, they'll actually, it's generally the males. I haven't really seen too many females do this, but it's either establishing their territory or they're courting. But what they'll do is that they'll actually, once they take their stand, whether it's with, they see another male or the females in the cage with them, they'll take their stand, they'll anchor themselves with their feet, and they'll arch their back somewhat, and they'll take that tail and they'll actually swing it up vertically, and they'll move it either side to side or they'll have this undulating motion to it, and of course if things really start escalating, they'll actually vocalize as well too.
Really?
But that's really about it. I think it's not so much for defensive or aggression or anything like that. It's just basically to show the animal or show itself off.
Interesting.
Okay.
So I always feel like nature doesn't make mistakes, right? Like
No,
everything
no.
is for a purpose. And I always wonder when I see things, because they're beautiful to us, but they're very intentional by nature, So that intent is what like makes my head go crazy, That's interesting. So I always wonder, like, what do they do? I've heard of a lot of Australian leaf species spending a lot of time on stone. So I'm like, they're finding these things on stone and all this stone. Like, where is their leaves? Like, what is this leaf doing? Is it really like a stone, a piece of like flagstone, represent like what is the tail doing if these things are just on stone? But again, they probably evolved in the forest, moved to the stone, tail was already done, but just always curious, always interested in what nature did.
Yeah.
So I overheard one. I forgot where I heard it from, but if they drop their tail, are they pretty much done for the breeding season? They can't like really breed anymore.
That would be speculative, and the reason why I say that is because I've never had that happen in my collection.
Gotcha. Okay.
I do have animals that do have regenerated tails, and majority of them have their original tails. But I would say that, let's just hypothetically say that did happen. The female wasn't receptive, and the male definitely was, and she kind of let him have it. That tail, once that tail drops and all that, I would almost say that his season is done. He's going to concentrate on his resources. If you look at it, it's gone now, which was his fat reserves in his tail. And here, you're looking at probably about 35 to 40% of his body is gone. I mean, it's just damaged. It's gone. That's it. So the concentration now is survival. It's not breeding. So that animal and all that, more than likely, he's probably going to leave that female alone. I mean, there might be some, some very willing males out there, but I've never really heard about that. I've had, um, as far as like breeders and all that, I've never had an animal drop its tail. But a friend of mine years back and all that, I mean, this is probably over 10 years ago, he had a breeding pair, and his one of his animals, they dropped their tails. But it really wasn't that long afterwards that I think it was so traumatic for the animal that it actually ended up dying on him.
Really?
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Damn.
So they're not really reluctant to throw that tail, especially when they get towards adults. But this is the interesting thing too, is that the majority of your wild animals and all that, they almost all have regenerated tails. And it wouldn't surprise me if it's like multiple times that they've thrown their tails too, because everything in the wild's trying to eat them. So
Yeah.
and that's if that's the only defense that you have besides screaming or biting, that's it's a deterrent basically. So that's what you're gonna do.
It's interesting. Are you giving them any
So
more
speaking
food
of
once something when they drop their tail? I mean, that's like such a huge part of their body, like you said, almost 30% to regenerate. Are they getting any extra special? And I don't know if they necessarily would in the wild, but are you giving them any special treatment after an animal would drop its tail? What's the proper
Nope.
protocol? Just
Nope,
regular?
you just leave them.
Yeah.
You want to keep their obviously if their environment, there's you should already be cleaning their cage, taking feces out and whenever it comes about, but uh, you just leave them alone. Make sure that they're hydrated, make sure that they're fed, and definitely use your supplements.
Would you
when it's
separate them
appropriate.
from a female if you had them paired up?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
if for some chance that would happen, you definitely would have to pull that male out. It would probably be more advantageous to actually take the female out, because now the male's left in his home environment,
Yeah.
and he's actually going to be more established and comfortable in something like that.
Makes sense.
Okay, yeah. Smart. Yeah.
Speaking of that,
So
how do you introduce them when you're going to introduce a pair? Do you do the male into the female's enclosure? How would you introduce an adult pair?
Well, if I have an initial pair that's and which this year I've got probably. Yeah, there's two different species, animals I've been raising up the last couple of years, and it takes, with these guys, it takes anywhere from like 2.5 to 3.5 years for them to become sexually mature. But once um, they are old enough to introduce each other, you want to do that like basically about a week or two right before the cooling period ends.
Okay.
And they're not moving around that much. The cage is already established. No territories have been established as well either. So their metabolisms definitely lower because they're not eating, but they can get used to one another within that parameter, that cage and all that. So, and once it starts warming up, yeah, for a couple weeks and all that, you want to watch those animals just to see if there's any type of aggression, because again, male lizards, they can be relentless, and even geckos and even Saltuarius and all that. So you got to watch out, because a
These
female may
Chihuahuas
not.
are going crazy on me. The last week, it must be
Mhm.
like Chihuahua breeding season because I got 12 pairs that are screaming and squonking all night. It's like,
Yeah,
God.
yeah.
oh
But
man.
if one interesting thing too is that if one animal is stressed out, because they're in a closed environment, one cue, actually two cues that will help you to, understand if something is actually going on, is where the animals are or where are the animals in that cage. So if you see your animal, let's just say you're using a zoo exoteric cage, 18-18-24, got your, everything set up. If an animal is laying on the ground, uh, that animal is going to be stressed out.
Yeah,
Or if it's up on top of the screen, hanging there for like a day or two, it's stressed out. Something is not right in that cage. These animals they like to rest vertical or horizontal. They don't like to be hanging upside down or laying flat on the ground. And also too, when it comes to husbandry, if the cage is actually if the humidity and the watering is not met, they will actually hug the ground as well too, because they are trying to absorb as much moisture as they can.
Moisture. Okay.
Yeah, so you really got to watch out for that. But if you have a pair and they're not getting along, one of them's going to be either on the ground or hanging upside down on top of the cage. And if that's the case, pull that animal out, set it up in a different cage for maybe like a week and a half, and then get it back in that cage, because especially if it's during the breeding season, once a female drops a clutch of eggs and all that, there are some these animals, I don't want to say they don't necessarily bond, but they do. If you have a compatible pair, you definitely don't want to break them up. And you've probably seen that, Anthony, with your Chihuahuas and stuff like that. Once you got a good established pair, you don't break them up at all.
Absolutely.
So, same thing with these guys. But there might come a time and all that where you got to separate them a little bit just for a little bit of aggression.
Yeah. So can you go ahead and kind of explain your brumation process?
Well, for me, it's easy because I live
You
so
live in
far north.
Wisconsin. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, right now we got polar bears walking in the backyard. I mean, literally, yeah, on Tuesday we got wind chills that are going to be minus 35 or 40, and
God,
yeah,
that's so painful.
it's retarded. Hang on, I'm looking at the computer right now. It says minus 3 Fahrenheit, so just for regular
Oh,
temps. Yeah,
oh,
so. But
that is crazy.
anyway, yeah, so I don't have to really open a window up or get a fan on or air conditioning. So what I do is that because I live far north, everything starts really cooling off, especially like in October, and or I should say about the end of September. So by October and all that, the activities are reduced for like all my lizards, and a lot of them have just like stopped eating. And of course, you want to reduce your photo period, and I also reduce the amount of their humidity or spraying. So yeah, generally like their humidity in their cages and all that should be like around 60 to 80%. And when I say 80%, you don't want it to be saturated,
Spike.
but it can fluctuate, and it should, at different times of the year. But your humidity, you don't want these things to dry out because they're not going to experience that like in the wild, because they're going to, they're going to they're going to utilize these microclimates and or micro habitats and all that, and they're going to get in rock fissures or different logs or whatever it may be in that. So like in captivity and all that, at least for me, I shut like all my lights off, any type of heating elements and all that come November 1st, and they're down for November, December, and about half of January. So I feel that's long enough. As far as like temperatures and all that, I've experimented with that over the years, and this holds true like with a lot of other geckos and lizards I work with. 50 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit really works. If you get them up to 60, they become active, and if they're
Okay.
active,
Yeah.
they want to eat. And now if those temperatures drop at night for whatever reason, that food's not going to digest in their gut. So it's just going to sit there and rot. You don't want
I
that
heard
at
that's
all.
dangerous. Like with a lot of like my
Absolutely
bearded
dangerous.
dragons,
Yeah.
they were.
Yep.
I just have a couple for pets, and I was reading or watching something. They were saying before they brumate, like it's all like actually dangerous to feed them or for them to have food in their stomachs before they brumate.
Yeah. Yeah. Even like with my, I don't necessarily do it with geckos and all that, but like with some of my Taliquas, Agurnias, and that, a few other lizards, I'll soak them for,
Really?
for about 2.5 weeks prior to their brumation. And what I do is I just take like a shoebox or sweater box, put maybe a half an inch of lukewarm water, let soak the animals for like about about a half hour to an hour, and they'll defecate in the box, and that's what you want. You want that material, those urates, completely out of their system, and they're hydrated as well too. That's the biggest thing, is that when they go into their cooling period, you want them hydrated. You pull them out, throw them back in their cage, they dry off, and you want to repeat that about 3-4 times. And usually by that third time, there's no more feces coming
You're
out
not
of their
feeding
system.
them through this, right?
Oh no,
Food, they're
no,
just
no. They're done eating.
That's
So
interesting. I should try that. That's actually like a cool method. I've never thought about doing that because they always go to the bathroom to take a dump. You put them in that warm water. Do it a few times. They're getting hydrated. They're getting out of their system. That's like a brilliant, that's cool. Great information.
yeah, but like with the Saltuarius and all that, like I said, about 2.5 months for the cooling period, and then right after that, you just and I turn all the lights off as well too. I don't have any. They have light coming in from the outside, through various windows and that. But in a photo period, what lights are on are probably about have like an 8-hour duration, maybe about 9 hours at the very most. But then I'll turn the lights on, after that period, and then I just started, gradually increasing the temperature, and also the frequency of the misting. It might be I do spray them during our cooling period just to prevent, dehydration, and they will come out and drink, once in a while. But um, there's I usually wait about a week and a half to almost 2 weeks before I actually feed them, and it'll be a small meal. It'll only be like 1 or 2 insects, because you don't want to. If you're sleeping all night, you wake up in the morning. If you eat a big giant breakfast, you're going to be back on the couch or something like that. Or your gut's going to be rolling.
Yeah.
So
Sir.
it's the same principle applies to animals, and that it's moderation.
Nice. So, so what is your like preferred incubation method for them?
I've tried, different materials out there, and I got to say that I stay away from vermiculite, just because
Okay.
it will clog the pores. With
Mm.
Saltuarius eggs and all that, they're soft shell, and they're huge too. I mean, uh, surprisingly for the size of the geckos, those eggs are enormous, and the babies are enormous as well too. But what I've gone
What would you compare those
straight to,
eggs to?
what now?
What would you compare those eggs to?
So like a Salabrosis, I'd compare it to almost like a Leachianus egg.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah,
Damn.
they're that big. Yeah, those babies. So you have the width of. I think I might have some pictures of different baby Saltarius like on my Instagram page, but like a baby Salabrosis, they're the width of like a 8 ounce or 16 ounce cup.
Oh
So
wow. Okay.
yeah. So what I like to do is I use straight perlite, and I'll use a
Okay.
ratio of water to perlite, like 2 to 1. And now, as far as like incubation and all that, it can last anywhere from about usually like around 85 to sometimes up to like around 130, 140 days. It just all depends on
What kind of
the
temps?
what now.
What kind of temps are you use to incubate them that fast?
So here's the thing. Okay, first of all, Saltarius are not temperature sex determined,
Okay.
and believe me, I tried. Okay, and they're not. So because I want to know, it's
Yeah,
right out
Yeah,
of the
yeah,
gate
yeah.
when I got
Definitely.
these things. That's what I wanted to try. They are not temperature sex determined. If anyone says that, I would like to know. I'd like to see what kind of solid information they have
Yeah,
on it. But
absolutely.
the generally I let my temperature fluctuate. So like a daytime high would be anywhere like about maybe 75 to maybe 78 at the very very highest, but then I let it drop into almost to like around 68, 69 at night. So I actually keep my eggs, I don't set them up in an incubator, I keep them on the floor, and uh, and it just works for me. I'll keep them like in a little container, And what I like to do is use like the 8 or the 16 ounce deli cups with the pre-punch holes, and I'll fill it up maybe with or probably about 3/4 of the way with that perlite and the ratio that I just mentioned. Place the eggs in there, put the dates, who they came from, bloodlines, all that information, write it on the cup, not on the eggs, because these animals bury their eggs. And then I just leave them alone. Usually about I'd say maybe 2 to 2.5 weeks prior to hatching, there's expedited development that happens, and this takes place with a lot of different species and all that. And so the eggs will actually swell, and they'll swell to about 20 to almost 25% their normal size. And that's an indication. You can see it almost like day by day by watching them. If yeah, let's say you're at those temperature parameters and all that. By the end of that incubation period, let's say 3 to 4 months and all that, you just got to watch it. You'll see those eggs actually start expanding.
No.
So, and whatever materials around them will actually start, those eggs are actually pushing that material away from it, which is kind of cool. And then, all of a sudden you got a little snout poking out of the eggs, and it only takes a
Nice.
couple hours for those babies to hatch out, but they're quite large when they pop out.
I heard they're fairly large. I have a
Yeah.
quick question. You had mentioned that they bury their eggs so you don't write on them. Is it
No.
dangerous? Is it dangerous to write on eggs? Can you explain that to me? Because I do. I like when crested gecko eggs or something hatch, I put a little dot on them with a permanent marker, and I always wonder, is this going to penetrate the egg? I mean, and thus far, I can't really tell that it has or if it has done anything, but I've always wondered, and now you mentioned it, and I'm like, huh, I'm not the only one that's thought this. Is it dangerous?
I guess it's all in perspective, because there's a lot of people that have used, I know a lot of turtle breeders and all that have used lead pencils for years writing on their turtle eggs, and they've had no, it hasn't been detrimental to the eggs, at all. Perfect babies hatch out. Now, when you go with a Sharpie marker or something like that, you have to kind of think about this, that those eggs are porous. They're not hard shelled. And they're the way the egg is structured and all that, it's like a giant oxygen machine and all that. It's taking in oxygen, releasing it and everything. Yeah, there you go. So
like a little line on them.
So it might be like breathing in those fumes, right?
I'm like, how is this?
Well, it could, but the thing is, I have never heard anybody, let's say have eggs die because of a Sharpie marker and all that. So if that's the method that you're comfortable with and you're having success, then keep doing it. But for me personally, I set all my eggs up individually, and I don't keep them like in a tray setup or nothing like that. And it's just easier for me to write on the container, not on the egg. Now with Saltuarius and all that, like I said, they bury their eggs. But the cool thing about these guys is that the substrate and all that in their cage is that they utilize that to the full. And what I mean by that is that they're mound nesters. So just like crocodilians and all that, let's say American alligator and all that, they utilize the vegetation around them and they build this giant mound and they bury the eggs in the middle. So Saltuarius will do that. Now, not all of them will do it, but the majority of them will do it. The only one that I've had that will not utilize making a mound is like Swainei. But I've had all the rest of them. Salabrosis are notorious. They'll take all the material in their cage and they'll make this giant mound in their,
cool.
Oh yeah,
that's dope.
And the thing that I've timed it down to is that if a female's gravid, she's ready to deposit her eggs and all that. It's always like around 1 to 4 a.m. So they utilize that time, and that's when they lay their eggs and all that. So, like in the mornings and all that, especially in the breeding season, for me, I'm up at the crack of dawn, getting ready for work and that. and I'll go down there and if I see the cage tore up, I see a mound and all that, I know that she's deposited her eggs, and those eggs are way at the bottom. Now, a lot of people, myself and all that, I always wondered, well, what is the reason for mounding? You got to look at the logistics of it and all that. One, those eggs are protected. They're in a more controlled environment. And if they're in a mound, especially if you live in, let's say, a rainforest type environment and all that, if it's raining, that rain is going to, that mound's going to repel that rain.
Yeah.
It's not going to really soak in. So, and, wind as well too, and other elements and all that.
The
So
heat
it's more
from
of a,
just the decomposition of the foliage they put on top, right?
they don't do that. It's just the soil.
Oh, they don't use leaves and stuff?
Yeah.
Oh, all right. That's interesting. When you pull the eggs up, do you place them in the cup the same way you found them, or do you candle them and look for an embryo and do that whole
No,
thing?
no, because they roll their eggs like in the substrate, and they're completely caked up.
Okay.
Yeah, and you
Well,
can't wash it
Ebanaois
off
do that
either.
too, right? I believe Ebanaois or some leaftails, Madagascar leaftails will roll them in the dirt and
Mhm.
put them there. Interesting.
Yeah. So, is there when you're breeding, right? So, is there any kind of considerations for successfully rearing these the babies?
Um, Definitely keep them separate. So
Yeah.
we kind of talked about it a little bit, and just watch your your temperature parameters and your watering, and just mainly your insects. You just don't want these animals stressed out. Especially
Yeah.
the
Okay.
smaller species and all that. You get into white burbic, Catay, um, and even baby swain eyes and all that. They're pretty fragile, and they they won't, like I said, they won't eat until like maybe about 7 or 14 days and all that after they hatch out. And when they do, it's you should only offer like one insect, especially like a small tiny cricket that has the back legs pinched off. Excuse me, so that way they can hunt that prey item down successfully, and and get on with its life basically.
Interesting.
Yeah.
We've mentioned water quite a few times, but we haven't really touched on the topic. What's your watering, misting? What does that look like? What are you spraying every day? Do you leave a water dish?
No, I never leave water dishes in any of my gecko cages because 10 times out of 10 they use it as a toilet. They'll go right for it, and I don't care if it's terrestrial or boreal. They see that water, they defecate in it, and all it is just more maintenance for you. So I've had a couple of friends that in Europe and also here in the U.S. that have had Saltuarius use misting systems,
Okay.
and that's great. But for me personally, even though I've tried misting systems in the past, I don't like them. What I want to do is like spray my cages down like every morning, and depending on the type of year and all that, and especially where you live, in the United States, if you live like in a drier climate, such as you, Jason, and all that, like out in Arizona, you may have to water like 2-3 times a day just to
Really?
keep your
Yeah.
humidity up. But
That's
like
what
for
I'm
me,
doing for my Ebanawi right now because it's in a Exoterra. So, but my Sycamore over here is in a PVC, so I literally only have to spray them 3 times a week, and then
Mhm.
but I also have like a humidifier that goes right into it, so that's like this little thing right here.
A fogger.
Yeah, so it fogs into there at night at 10 at night until about only from like 10 to 12, so 2 hours a night.
Yeah,
So I literally don't spray that much just to keep the relative humidity up in there.
yep,
So
yeah,
yeah,
and
so
that
those different ways I got to do it.
Yeah, so what I'll do is that I'll spray all my cages like in the morning, and let's say it's just like in the spring, summertime, early fall. I'll spray my cages in the morning, and then I may do a light spraying like at night. But one of the things too is that I always have a fan going to keep good air circulation. And
Yeah,
one thing about these animals, you want them to drink. You need humidity and all that, but you don't need a saturation and all these
Exactly.
droplets, hanging on sides of their cage and all that. They need that good airflow, and it's good husbandry to prevent different bacteria, all sorts of nasty stuff developing in your cages and that mold and everything. So yeah, good airflow, good watering, but it's basically mornings, maybe a little bit at night, and and I'll drench the cages pretty good, but within a couple hours it's dried out. But
Okay.
the soil itself and all that, it's staying relatively not wet, not dry, but just moist enough for them.
Yeah.
And you're doing this by hand, just to be clear for
Yep.
everybody. You're
Yeah,
spraying by
I do
hand.
that with all my lizards, even desert species too, because all you're doing is replicating dew.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. People think I'm nuts with 200 lizards that I don't have a misting system. When I hand spray, I'm doing so much more than spraying. People don't
Yeah.
get it. I mean, I'm watching
Yeah.
everything. I'm looking at everything. I mean, I need to hand spray. And every cage
Yeah.
is a little different, and depending on where it is in the room, it's there's so many factors. I can't just flip a switch and say soak the things. Doesn't work like that.
Yeah, you have a more personal observation of what's going on, per cage and per animal and all that. I mean,
Absolutely.
even
Exactly.
like your chihuahuas and all that, they're out and about and all that. You just spray the chihuahua. They
Yep.
love it. They experience that in the wild.
Well,
Just
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
and they need it. So it's same thing like with Saltuarius as well too. But yeah, I do that like with all my lizards.
How hard are these things to keep on a level of 1 to 10? Is comparison, and I don't want to bring up new cow, but new cows are like super popular animals. So for comparison species or animals, I think that they're good. How hard are these Aussie leaftails to keep in comparison to New Caledonian geckos?
Well, if you're a beginner, I really wouldn't recommend them.
Really?
I would try like, cut your teeth on some other different species before you jump into these. You know,
Okay.
these are valuable animals, and you definitely don't want to throw your funds away. But
No.
start out with something, a little bit easier. But as far as like a rating, um, or a comparison and all that, because they are related to each other and they almost have the exact same requirements. If I had to say, it's almost pretty easy to keep these things. Once you understand the parameters, as I always say, you can run these things over with a Chevy truck and they'll still bounce back. I mean, they're
Really?
pretty tough. So
Yeah.
they are reluctant to throw their tails. If you take them out, they're not going to go wild, run across the room. They're not going to, but they don't want to be handled. That's the thing.
Okay. That was my next question.
So this is not a pet. This is a project. And that's how you have to treat these animals. And
It's just a
um,
display. That's what I always
exactly.
kind of treat them as. Display
Yep.
Honor,
animal.
a privilege.
Yep.
Look, don't touch. Yeah.
Yep, exactly, and all that. But they're long-lived lizards. 20 plus years easily. I think my
Awesome.
oldest Salabrosis, I think they're like 21 or 22 years old now, and they're still breeding.
Really?
So yeah, I mean they're good size too. That's the one
That's
thing about as I've mentioned a couple times, these are big geckos and all that. There's been debates on whether Cornutus is larger than Salabrosis or vice versa and all that. Regardless and all that, they're still giant geckos. And the really cool thing is that um, if you do some research and all that, whether in publications or even on the internet, there are some photos of some giant animals out there. I'm talking like pushing probably close to 12 inches. But the thing is, those are old animals, and they've lived in the wild, not in captivity. You'll never reach those sizes like in captivity, in my opinion,
Really?
just because of like different trace minerals and different opportunities or insects and
Yeah.
all that, the variety and all that.
The baby lizards.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Baby crusteds and morning geckos.
Right.
What are some good pieces
Yeah.
of literature that you could suggest for people that might be interested in this? Is there any good books or any websites or papers, articles, anything that you would personally direct someone to read before they even thought about them?
Well, I'll be quite honest with you. There's not much out there. I mean, that's deal specifically like with Saltuarius. There are, different field guides to Australia that are out there, and the majority of them are older, but there are some newer ones by I think it's Jerry Swan, and you can find those on Amazon. What they're going to do is basically they're going to show you a map of where they come from, a little bit of
Just the
information on their
basics.
habitat, and a photo of the animal. But there's, as far as like a care guide, there's really not much. Um, the majority of your information is, like older. There's a couple older German uh, articles.
Mm.
One was in Draco. And that one, geez, that was probably, I would say, almost like probably 15 years ago now, and it covers a lot, which is really good. Um, and as far as like anything like recent, the only thing that I can really recommend is there's the Danny Brown series of Australian reptiles and amphibians. And there's two books that he has that deal with, let's say Australian geckos. And there's a whole chapter in there, like on leaf-tailed geckos, which covers
Yeah,
phylarus
yeah.
and the Saltuarius.
Okay.
And there's some information out there, or that's in that publication on how to take care of them, but there's not much. It's just like the surface. It doesn't get
Sounds
into
like
like,
something you should maybe start publishing. Put your name on a nice paperback or something.
well, I've been approached, and I've
I'd imagine so.
yeah, I've had two individuals ask me about that, one over in Europe and one in the U.S.
I'd
But
imagine
here's
so.
the issue and all that, and I'm not being disrespectful to anybody, but not a lot of people read anymore. And as far as like selling books and all that,
It's
that's almost
true.
becoming a thing of
Very
the
true.
past. And now you're putting it as, you're introducing a herpetological publication and all that. And unless it's, like an inch or 2 inches thick and all that, there's, nobody's going to really, pick something like that up. So
Very
you have
niche.
to really look at the big picture of things and all that. So that, and as far as like, Googling, this genus and all that, there's not a whole lot out there
Uh-huh.
either. As far as like papers and all that, there's a couple descriptive description papers out there, but it's not going to go into the care. It's just going to go into, or the
Yeah.
husbandry and all that, or even breeding, nothing like that. Even like the paper for Saltuarius exemus, the newest, member of the group. Um, it hardly gives any information on the type of habitat that they came from. There's I read that paper. I actually have it somewhere here, but there's just not a whole lot. But that's not what it was for. It's
Yeah.
just the
Yeah.
taxonomic description and all that of the animal. So um, yeah, I would like to say that, hey, there's, go to this website, go to, this bookstore or whatever, and here's a publication on it, but there's really not a whole lot. Years and years ago, maybe I'm sure you guys heard of the Vivarium magazine.
Yeah.
Philippe de Vagele published that, like 25 years ago or something like that. There was two articles in there by Robert Porter. That one, it was a two-part article and all that. One was on Phylarus, and one was on Saltuarius. And there's really good information in those two articles, but they're really tough to find. I mean, they're out there, but it's. I mean, I'll just share this with you. One of the interesting tidbits of information that he brought out was about Saltuarius cornutus and all that. For the longest and all that, they always thought that there was two populations of them. There was a northern population and a southern population. So, cornutus, again, it's a giant animal and all that, and they were described, back in the late 1800s. So, it took quite a while and all that for people to really start looking at these animals deeply and all that. And when they started looking at that southern population, while it's a little bit smaller than the northern population, scales are a little bit different, patterns a little bit different, colors a little bit different. Well, hey, guess what? This is a brand new species. They named it Saltuarius swaini. So that's how that came about. And even like your Wyberba, for the longest, they knew that there was like these different populations and all that. And then I think that was back in 2008. There was one paper by 3 different authors and all that, and one of them's Civic, something like that. And that's an in-depth article. Yeah, it's an in-depth article and all that. But they looked at several these different populations, and because they all thought that it was Wyberba and it wasn't, and so it actually turned out to be 2 brand new species and all that. One was Maritzi and the other one was Kite. So that's how they came about.
Oh, there's definitely more out there then.
Yeah, there definitely is, but that's really about it. A good friend of mine over in Europe and all that, he just published an article on leaf-tailed geckos not too long ago. It's I can't remember what the and forgive me of it, but there's a brand new magazine. It's published by, I think, Philippe de Vagelet and Bayon. I'm sorry, it's just escaping me and all that what it is, because I don't have a subscription to it.
I'll find it. That's cool.
Yeah,
that's good.
we'll look for it, and I'll put in these show notes.
Yeah, but I think it's I don't know if it's in English or if it's in German. That's the only thing. So, but if you want something that is in English, definitely check out the Danny Brown series, because I know
I got that on a PDF right now, and like I said, I scroll through that. I make notes on it. Like I said, because I keep a bunch of different species of Aussie geckos. So whenever I keep something, I make little notes, like my Williams eye. Saying like do like a 12 by 12 by 18. I was like, no, I didn't like that. Like I had an accident with one of them, so I was like, okay, because it literally took a dive and smacked the floor because it was trying to go after a cricket, hit its head, and gone. Like it would stay upside down all the time and everything. So I was like, okay, notes on that. 12 by 12 by 12. We're not doing the 12 by 12 by 18s for these ones. It's just way too big of an enclosure for them to take that kind of a dive for some crickets or something like that. So, little notes like that. I know he did. Didn't he he made a second edition of that field guide of Australian geckos and pycopods, correct?
Right. I think it was like almost 10 years ago now that the first editions that came out.
Yeah.
And there's revised editions that are out right now, or they have been for the last, I think, 2 years.
Yeah.
And I don't think you can just jump on Amazon Prime and buy them or something like that.
No, I had to go on eBay and try to get it. I think they were selling for like $50 or $60. So
yeah, they're not cheap, but the thing is, you pay for what you get.
Exactly. No, information is priceless. So
exactly, and I've always tried to promote this, and I always will. If you can start a herpetological library, do it. You're only going to benefit. You're going to grow in knowledge, and you know what? You can always go back to that material for references and all that. And the great thing is that you can share it with others as well too.
Yep. I just picked up 2 more books. I got the geckos biology, the husbandry biology, and breeding. And then I just picked up the field guide of Madagascar. Like I said, because I'm getting those Blazdactylus, so I wanted to kind of read up on them and see what's going on with that stuff. But yeah, there's definitely a whole lot right there. Like, now this is information for people to actually listen to and see if they're confident enough that they want to go ahead and try their hand at Saltuarius. I do have what was I saying? So is there any kind of health issues that we need to know about these geckos? Is there anything that's common that would keep someone from like, I don't want to take my hands on that one?
Not really. They're as long as you keep um, their stress level down, and you have their parameters met. They're very pretty healthy. They stay pretty healthy for you. It's just of course it's like anything else, it's about observation. But of course, if an animal throws its tail, you can either whether it's cage aggression or something like that, with another animal, get that other animal out, leave that injured animal like in its cage. At least that's what I would do. um yeah, the only thing that I could see really happening is uh if the humidity is just too high for too long.
Okay.
Somebody may just you start getting mold and
Fungus and stuff.
mushrooms or whatever. You're creating a way too wet environment for them, and they're really not like that. They don't need those type of conditions. But you could probably get some skin fungus starting to grow. And as far as like shedding as well too, they shed like an almost one big giant piece. um yeah, it's and they bite it off completely. Sometimes they consume it, a lot of times
They
they
don't
don't.
eat it.
No. Yeah,
Like
yeah,
that's so unique. Australian geckos don't eat their shed. I can't wrap
yeah,
my head around it.
yeah, it's kind of crazy because yeah, with other species it's it's a resource.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So yeah, yeah,
exactly.
they don't. But here's the thing about Australian species and all that. It's just not geckos and all that. That continent is an eat or be eaten type of environment. And so they have to grow fast, reproduce fast, and
Yeah.
all that in order to perpetuate their species and all that. They got to keep going somehow. So why eat your shed and all that when you got flies everywhere?
Yeah.
And that's what flies and termites, they're everywhere in Australia.
Yeah,
So
I'll vouch for those flies. I've been to Australia like 2 times, and
mhm,
both times just nothing but flies in my face. So I
yeah,
I could vouch for that one.
yeah. So
Um,
but I can't really come up like with any type of like serious health issues and all that. They usually remain fairly healthy lizards for you.
nice,
Good.
nice.
It's good to know.
Yeah, definitely. Go ahead.
Yeah, and if somebody was absolutely interested, in acquiring them, my uh, my opinion is get a hold of a breeder, find out who's out there, and talk to them. Don't talk to them once, don't talk to them twice. Talk, come up with some really good questions,
Mhm.
and that should be about like any type of reptile or animal that you're keeping, and just do what research that you can a little bit, but and don't jump the gun. Absorb that information, think about it, for a
Yeah,
little bit. Hopefully the breeder still has the animal or animals that you want. I'm sure that they will. Um, yeah, but get your cage set up and everything. But just do your research and be patient, because that's how you succeed. And eventually jump into them. Start out with one or two of them and just cut your teeth on them a little bit. And you never know, you might be working with the other species as well too.
I
I
bet I
sure
can
am.
imagine that's how it goes for a lot of people.
Yeah,
Right?
Do you
yeah, we
find
can't
out
just
of
have one lizard,
yeah,
No, no, not
no.
at all.
do you find that any one of these species that you keep in particular is easier or harder to keep than the other? Does anything vary with husbandry in any which way, shape, or form between different species?
Um, there are some variations,
Minor stuff.
a little, yeah, like a little bit. I'll say that the Salabrosis is probably the more heat tolerant out of all of them.
Okay.
I know for a fact that it wasn't on purpose or anything like that. Their temperatures probably got up to their cage probably up to in like the upper 80s, but that doesn't mean that the where they were hiding out in their cage was that warm as well too. Yeah, it could have been like 80 degrees or 82 or something like that. But the other ones, the cornutus and all that, they're very Cornutus and Swaini are very, very shy. They, like the Salabrosis, they're the run and gunners. I mean, they will come out pretty much like any time. But the Cornutus and Swaini, they won't come out until those lights are completely off. It's dead quiet, and those lights have been off for like at least a good 45 minutes or hour or something like that. Then they feel comfortable and they'll start coming out exploring their cages and that. The other ones, like Wyberba, Kite, and Maritzi and that, they're kind of like in between, I guess you could say. Yeah, they're a little bit shy, but they're a little bit on the bolder side as well too. Especially Wyberba. Yeah, they're tough as nails and that. But and again, you want to take a look at how their habitat is, and just try and duplicate that the best of your ability, in captivity, and you'll have very relaxed, very stressed out, stressful, animals and all that. So
Nice.
Awesome.
All right, so we are coming close to the end of this. Anthony, do you want to go ahead and do your closer?
I got one more question. We
Sure.
didn't get to
Shoot
ask, and
on,
I know
brother. Let's go.
everybody's curious too. What are you doing for lighting, Phil? Like, how are you using a UVB and just a regular light? Or are you using a heat source? I guess it's like three questions. Are you using a basking spot of any sort? And what type of like lighting setup are you running? Or do you recommend it? Or are you running and something you recommend?
Okay, from juveniles to adults, no heat source at all. No external heat source like a heat bulb or heat emitter, nothing like that. Just room temperature. Okay, and again, if that room, wherever you're keeping them, if the temperature rises a little bit, if you got a fan going or something like that, you're not going to be killing the animals. If you exposed them to, like 90 or 95 degrees, yeah, you're going to kill them and all that, but you're not really going to do that. So you're going to keep those, parameters, in check. So no heat source at all. And as far as like lighting and all that, I'll be honest with you. The last like year and a half, I've with the incandescent band on bulbs and that and ballast, it's been an absolute joke, and it's been a source of frustration for me because I worked with a lot of different species and all that, and so now I'm, it's whittling down to T5 bulbs and LEDs. I hate LED lights. I'll be honest with you because they're so bright, and I really feel that they're a detriment to the irises of a lot of lizards. It don't matter if you have them 24 inches above the bottom of the substrate or cage and all that. Some species like it, but those species that I've noticed that they like it, those are high altitude animals. And so they're used to that, but when you have nocturnal species and all that, they hate it. So what I've been doing is that I know that last fall I lost, just because of the age, I lost like 11 ballasts where I had T8 bulbs. And what I would do is that I had Zoomed 10.0 UVB on one side, and on the other side, I had what was called a Philips daylight bulb, and it didn't really emit like any type of spectrum, UVB or UVA and all that. It was just for the lighting, and I'd use that for years and years with success. But you can't go to any of the box stores and buy those ballasts anymore. You can't buy T8s anymore. So now we're at a real crossroads in our hobby right now.
Yeah.
And somebody has, and I know that, some, like Zoomed and Exoterra and that, they're trying to come up with all these different ideas, and kudos to them. But somebody's going to come out ahead on that, in that department. And when they do, they're going to, I know this, I'll probably invest in stocks in their company because, it's just not reptiles and all that. You got your aquariums, your fish, your birds, all that stuff, that, this will be applied to plants, all that stuff. So, So what I've been using is just like the T5 bulbs, and because I like my cages and all that. Let's just say for adults and all that, I have side by side two Exoterras that are the 18-18-24s and all that. So I use like a 48-inch, or it's not a true 48-inch, it's a 47-inch ballast with a T5 bulb on it. And Arcadia's got different amounts of UVB and all that stuff, and I'm just using like the lowest one, and that's it. Again, sometimes animals will come out the basket, but a lot of times they don't. So, but I do want to establish a photo period, and I do have my sago palms growing too, and they need light as well too. So
I feel like
so that,
like a lot of these animals need. And I asked a few people this, but have you ever seen the David Attenborough show In Color? It's like Life in Color or something. Well, a lot of reptiles see in UV. Like they
oh
need
yeah,
UV lights to see, to really see. And that's why I think like I use them personally, because there's so much more to them than just absorbing light. Like UV rays are part of their world. Like it's yeah, I could go on for a really long time about it, but I get it. I get it. I
no,
understand.
no, and you got a legitimate subject to talk about now, because um, there's we see in one spectrum, and the dogs and cats they see in a different,
Hey,
lizards especially too. And so when you start looking at the some of these reptiles and all that, even amphibians too, there's a reason why they have certain patterns on them, and those patterns are certain
yes,
colors and
yes,
all that.
yes,
It's for communication, and
yes.
because they can see through a forest or a desert way far away, this like little blue dot, or
That's
this
so awesome that you know this. 'Cause I try to
yeah,
explain to
so
people, and people look at me like I'm crazy. That's
there
awesome that you know that.
oh no, there was it was like over 25 years ago. There was her name is Allison Alberts. She worked at the San Diego Zoo, and Jeff Lem, and they did comprehensive studies on UVB, UVA, and communication on lizards and all that. And they were coming up with it way back then, and then it kind of fell off to the side. And now it's only been like maybe the last 2-3 years that it's starting to take on a little bit,
Good.
a little bit of interest in all that, because we're, as breeders and all that, hobbyists and all that, we're starting to noticing these things too. And and I will say this: it's kind of cool to take a black light to some of these lizards and
Hell yeah.
see what kind of patterns and communications are going on.
Even
Um,
arachnids, like
yeah,
jumping spiders. I mean,
yep,
that's huge with them
yeah,
ultraviolet rays. I mean, it's that's my whole point. Is even if something's nocturnal, don't just assume that it's just the basking benefits that they're getting from that light. Like there's a lot of benefits to those rays, and it's just so much more natural. You're better off having it than not having it, even if it's a low percentage. I mean, it's just part of their world, and they should have that.
yeah.
All right, go ahead, Ant. Go ahead and give him your last one.
All right, so I guess my closeout question, I always ask everybody this, so don't take offense. I'm not just repeating it, but I ask everyone if a 10-year-old kid came up to you at a show and said, "I want to be you someday. I want to do what you do." What advice would you give a 10-year-old kid that wanted to grow up and breed? I guess for argument's sake, say breed reptiles for a living. What would you tell that kid?
Well, that's kind of ironic and all that, because literally at the let's see here, last October at the Tinley show, at my booth, I had something very similar like that
Oh,
happen. Yeah, it's I really did.
I can imagine so,
I was telling Wally Kern about that, and he, of
buddy.
course, yeah, Wally got it, and I mean, he's a great guy. And so what I did was that I had some red Ackies on the table, some ones that I hatched out, and
Nice.
the kid came up and he wanted one, and his mom and his dad was there, and his little and his sister, and I think that kid was probably about 9 years old. I mean, he stared at that cage for God, probably about an hour. And
Could you remember being that age and looking at something like that?
Oh
Because
yeah,
I can, and I haven't changed, honestly. But
yeah. I had some other stuff going on at the behind the booth, but I did not ignore that. Yeah, Gecko Code. Yeah, I'm sure, Bobby, that was you. So, um, but I took the time out for that kid, and the mom, she was right, of course, right there because whenever there's a minor involved and all that, make sure the parents are there. Okay, that's always
Absolutely.
advice, no matter what. You make sure
Yeah.
mom and dad's there. So I asked this young man, and I'm like, "Do you want to hold one?" And he's like, I mean, his eyes grew. They're like dinner plates. He's like, "Yeah, can I do that?" I'm like, "Yeah, they're still cold right now because this was like in the morning." So I put it at let him hold it, and he's just petting this thing. He's just, I mean, this kid was 159% focused on this red Aki. And the red Aki was not, crazy trying to, get away from him or nothing like that. And I could see, I watched the daughter. The dad wasn't, too that much involved, but the mom certainly was. And, and I was just helping this young man, and he wanted to go home with that red Aki. And his mom's like, "No, you are not going home with it." And so I looked at mom. I'm like, "Yeah, so what's up?" And she, because I didn't want to go home with him too. I wanted to sell him. So, but I'm not going to, try and pass off this animal. So the mom said that he already had like a bearded dragon. And he had some other type of lizard that he was not taking care of. And I asked him, I'm like, "So what do you got going on at home?" And he's like, "Well, I got a beard dragon and I got this other lizard, and I asked him, "Well, are you taking care of them? Are you cleaning them? Or or what are you doing?" He's like, "Well, I'm supposed to and all that, but I kind of forget." And mom's like, "Yeah, he definitely does forget." And I explained to him, that, this is a big, big responsibility and all that. This is a living animal, and this is something that, we all, would really love to have something like this, but it's, and we have a passion for it, but we have to know our limits, and we got to know, what we can do and what we can't do. And the mom's just absorbing this, and she appreciated it. I said, "I'll tell you what, I would really like to see you go home with this red Aki, and I'd really give you a pretty good deal because, I can tell you really like this. But you know what? You go home and you clean your cages and all that. And when you do it regularly, you come back. But I'm not going to sell you that animal." And, and he was like, "Oh man," he was just crushed, but the mom appreciated it.
he'll never
And,
forget that.
yeah. And, so it's one of those things that, um, I've always tried to encourage people to look outside the bubble, and and like you two guys, and I know for a fact that everyone's listening to this, they get it, okay, because we're very observant and we are outside that bubble looking in.
Absolutely.
Where there's this little tiny group of people that they don't get it. And so but you have to know your parameters. You got to know your boundaries and all that. And if you can, let's say keep a certain amount, whether it's one or two lizards or reptiles, whatever it may be, or maybe you can keep 200 of them. Maybe you keep, 700 of them or something like that, and make it work. That's great. But you got to know those limits. And so if anybody, would like to get into this, yeah, that would be great. But just know your limits, know what you can, what you can't do, and all that. And because you want to enjoy this, this is something that you're just not, doing on a whim. And if you are, don't do it because you're throwing your money, your hard-earned money away. Just you definitely want to enjoy this, and you want to share it with others too. And if some of those people don't get it, well, that's too bad for them. At least you and some, some other people will. So, but yeah, so I've had opportunities, mention to people that, don't do it, because you can see their situations and all that. And it's not that I'm being rude to them or something like that. It's just that, they're not ready. and you don't want these animals going to trying to be maintained in an environment
You're
that's
unique
not
for
right
that,
for
though,
them.
Phil. Because we both know not everybody would take that approach. That's a
Right.
Oh
very
no, they would have sold him that Aki real quick and be like, "Cool,
that's a
bye."
quality. That's a type of breeder I would look for to buy something. You're not just trying to
Yeah.
give everybody. You're trying to make a proper pairing. You need.
Yeah.
It's again. I could go on for hours about that, but I give you a lot of respect for that. That's awesome. You taught
Yeah.
that
It's
kid a lesson, like I said, he'll never forget. And that's amazing for the hobby. Great example for the hobby. Stop peddling these animals, breed smaller numbers,
yeah.
work with what you're passionate about, and get them to people that are equally passionate.
Hmm.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So for so mine, I always ask everybody this is, you know, what has been your biggest failures since being in this hobby? It doesn't have to be gecko related. It just the entire just reptile hobby. And what have you learned from that?
As far as like a failure, um, hmm, that's a very interesting question because we learn from our failures. Um,
Exactly. That's what I want. That's what we always want people to hear. Just know what have you learned from them, so they can go ahead and kind of know instead of them having to live that situation, they could just learn from that one, kind of, and then try to help themselves out the same way in that.
I I guess I'm going to get really personal on you guys. So, um, my mom passed away like almost 8 years ago, and I kind of wish she would have, seen what I've done.
Yeah,
Sorry for that.
Well, yeah,
yeah, that's a tough one.
so that was because I always tried to, like make her proud. So,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
sure you did, man. If you believe
uh, I,
in any higher
I
power,
know she
Phil,
does.
I'm sure she
Yeah,
sees. I'm sure she sees,
yeah,
and I'm
she
sure
look.
she's damn proud of you.
yeah,
Yeah, definitely, man. Hey, that's the second time I'm gonna start tearing up, man. For
yeah.
real. Oh man.
She
Well,
sees. She sees. She sees.
Yeah, it's but we always want to make somebody proud, and that was definitely one of my things. Like with my parents and all that, because in the beginning they never wanted me to get into this, and I can honestly tell you that I'm glad that I did because it's just expanded my universe, you could say. And I've met some awesome people, you guys, and bunch of a lot of people and all that throughout the
Your name is
know
known globally, Phil. People know your
out of the
name on
years and
every
all that.
continent on the planet. People know your name.
Yeah, it's well, I appreciate that, but yeah, it's always a learning experience. But yeah, there has been a lot of mistakes that I've experienced, and like I said, you learn from them, and you always have success, but I think you always have more failures more than anything. And it's not really, I mean, that's life, and it's really
oh
not
yeah.
a bad thing to go through it. But I think you grow as more of an individual, and family, and of course your animals that you're taking care of too.
Yep. Bobby is definitely right.
Yeah,
Like I said, those failures build character, right? So
yeah,
it builds the person that you are today. So and it builds for everybody else as well. Like, all our failures, we learn from it, helps us build to be a better person. So
yeah.
hopefully people can, learn something from that and just keep going on. Like I said, like what I'm doing, I'm hoping my kids look back and say, my dad did something really nice for this hobby. So that's really one of my goals for this as well. Is like
Mhm.
to leave a mark for my kids to be like, oh man, my dad really was like he really tried to improve this hobby in any capacity that he did. So I'm I'm right there with you with that stuff.
Yeah, and that's something to be proud of too, and all that. Because as I always say, when you go down that path, you're being selfless. You're being a Jedi. So,
Yeah. All right, Phil. Before we start crying, where can everybody find you?
well, I'm on. There's TrempersLizardRanch.com, which is my website, and I will be redoing that this winter, spring. I promise that. And I am on Facebook at Philip Tremper. But the main platform that I primarily use is Instagram at Philip Tremper. So that's, if you need to contact me, I would probably go down that route, like with Instagram. And there's a lot of cool pictures that I've got posted, different lizards I've worked with over the last couple years. It's not all of them, but some really interesting ones. And you'll see Shar-Pei dogs on there, and you'll see some fishing pictures as well too.
Awesome.
So
Nice.
Awesome. You have any special announcements or anything you'd like to tell the masses? Any shows you may be at, or anything you want to share?
we're always we're at the October and the Tinley or October and the March Tinley show. As I always say, we're in the back 40. We're way back in the corner and all that. But
I've been to your table plenty of times, just looking and looking and looking. I was like that little kid, but a grown man just looking like, oh my God, just looking at all the geckos. I'm like, oh.
Yeah, we used to do other shows too, like Sewer Fest, and also we put in about 17 years straight down at the Breeders' Expo, but we stopped back in 2015, and we just primarily do the Tinley show now. So if you're ever coming to that event, I highly recommend stopping by, seeing us, and also really looking at a lot of cool, take your time, come in Friday. And really just take your time looking at all these amazing reptiles, amphibians, and also insects as well too, because there's some really cool spiders and mantids there too.
Hell yeah.
Yep. Yeah. All right, everybody. Definitely, you guys have a great night. Don't forget. So we just posted Anthony's new episode, Sarah Sonorums, with Boris. It's up on our YouTube page right now.
Check it out, man. New cow corner just for you guys. Nothing but new cow species. Jason could take his other thing, go somewhere with it. We got this.
All right, everybody. Definitely have a great night.
Have a great night
afternoon,
again,
morning,
Phil.
whenever you guys listen to this.
Complete honor having you on here.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Going to appreciate this.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, definitely. Phil, you're dropping some knowledge on this one, man.
Thanks.
All right.